The Discovery, Chapter 13, Part 2. David walked down the stairs from Midnight's room to find the front door still open from the previous night. An ice-cold breeze crept in through the open doorway and a small amount of snow had found its way onto the hardwood floor.
Shit, guess we didn't close the door last night,
David thought aloud. David quickly made his way down the stairs and closed the door with a shiver. He made his way for his room and found his dresser full of winter clothes Midnight had helped him pick out over the last 2 months. David quickly dressed himself in his winter apparel. He threw on a pair of thick pants and wool socks before slipping on a thick orange jacket. He tied his shoes and threw on a black beanie before taking a minute to look at his appearance in the mirror.
Mid, why did you have to get me the orange one? We're just gonna play out in the snow, not go on an Arctic expedition,
David thought to himself. David took one last moment to ensure he had everything and stepped out of the room to meet Midnight. She trotted down the stairs as David closed his door.
Hey, David!
Midnight called out.
Yeah?
Did we close the door last night? There's snow on the floor.
Really? Maybe it came in under the door?
David called back.
That's weird. I guess I'll have to get that seal checked. Anyways, ready to go?
Midnight asked, as David rounded the corner into the entryway. David's eyes fell on the graphite mare in her winter apparel. She wore 4 black booties that fit snugly around her hooves, as well as a black scarf that was tightly wrapped around her neck. Lastly, she wore a dark blue beanie with extensions to cover her ears and 2 fuzzy pull cords dangling on either side of her neck. A small chuckle forced its way out of David as he took in her appearance.
What?
Midnight asked.
You are literally the cutest thing in the universe,
David said through a wide smile. Midnight blushed and turned away from David.
You're sweet, big guy.
She replied with an equally wide smile.
No, come on! You're gonna love the snow.
With that, Midnight opened the door and trotted outside with David close behind. The frigid blast of cold air hit both of them like a truck, but their spirits only rose as it blew over them. Midnight trotted out a little ways from the house before turning around and watching David as he took his first steps into the white powder. David slowly stepped into the snow and watched it as it compacted under his feet. He took a moment to remove his glove and grab a handful of snow. The ice-cold sensation brought a genuine smile to his face, as the snow slowly started to melt in his grasp. After a moment, he looked up at the sky to see the seemingly infinite snowflakes as they gently drifted down to the ground.
Wow,
David breathlessly whispered. Midnight watched David with growing excitement. Her smile nearly doubled in size as David's face adorned a look of wonder.
Oh my gosh, he's adorable.
Midnight quietly declared. After a few moments of simply taking in the outside world, David's attention was pulled to Midnight as she waved him over. He happily covered the distance between them and hugged Midnight tightly upon reaching her.
So, what do you think?
Midnight asked, almost more excited than David was.
it's beautiful. I can't believe I've never seen it before,
David said, incredulously.
You have no idea how happy I am that I get to share this with you.
Midnight said through a wide smile.
You're the best thing that's ever happened to me,
David whispered as he held Midnight even closer. Midnight felt a tug on her heartstrings, and her lips trembled at David's words. She leaned forward and kissed him. David returned the gesture in kind, and for a moment the outside world was gone, and the only things that seemed to exist were a pony and her human. Time stood still, and in that moment, they both felt complete. Sadly, all good things must end, and their kiss broke, albeit regrettably. Midnight slowly retracted from David and sat on her haunches. David kneeled down beside her and happily smiled. David returned a warm smile before speaking again.
I think it's safe to say that you're the best part of my life, too.
Well then, I must be doing something right,
David responded. David and Midnight sat together for a minute and enjoyed the beauty of the white world around them.
So, wanna make a snow pony?
Midnight asked.
Hell yeah.
David answered.
Well, I think it kinda looks like a pony,
David said as he turned his head to the side to better see the snow pony.
David, no, it doesn't.
Midnight replied, tilting her head even further to the side. The snow pony in question sat about 3 feet tall. Its legs were at least 4 times as thick as a normal pony's legs, and its back was flat like a plateau. The head was a crudely shaped ball, and the eyes were 2 differently sized rocks that weren't even level with each other. David and Midnight stared at their abomination for a long time before either of them found the words.
I blame you.
Midnight said, her eyes still locked on the abomination they made.
Hey, I'm not a pony! If this thing were a snowman, it would have been easy.
David said, matter-of-factly.
I'm not the one who can't tell the difference between a large rock and a small rock.
Midnight said defensively.
There were no other rocks!
David countered.
I found 10 more over there.
Midnight replied, pointing towards the woods.
Well, if you wanted the rocks to be perfect, then maybe you should have went and got them.
David said.
You volunteered!
Midnight accused.
Because you said you had the body and head.
David started, before a snowball collided with his face. David took a moment to recover from the icy snow now covering his face, before quickly wiping it off. His gaze fell onto Midnight, as she was already levitating more snowballs. She wore a wicked grin on her face, as she stared back into David's eyes.
I'll warn you, Midnight. The last person to throw a snowball at me is still buried to this day.
David said, scooping snow into his hands. Midnight tilted her head to the side and dropped the snowball she had formed in her magic.
Wait, I thought you said you're not...
Midnight started, before David landed a hit right on her muzzle.
Rule number 1 of a proper snowball fights? Never let your guard down.
David said with an evil grin.
Uh-oh.
Midnight whispered as David charged at her. Midnight bolted away from David as he launched snowball after snowball at her. His aim was poor, and Midnight effortlessly dodged his attacks as she pelted him over and over with magically fired snow. However, David would not be deterred, and pushed through the icy bullets as he charged after the devious unicorn. The soft crunch of the snow under their feet and hooves could barely be heard over Midnight's giggles. David chased Midnight completely around the house several times over, while more and more snow clung to his jacket. At the rate that he was being hit, it might as well have been a big orange target. Still, he pursued, growing ever closer to his goal. Both of them were breathing heavily as they rounded the corner to the front yard again, and David finally got his opportunity. A small patch of ice formed on the road was all it took for Midnight to slip and lose her balance. After taking a seconds to right herself, she began to gallop again, but it was already too late. 2 glove-wrapped hands found their marks on Midnight's barrel, and all she could do was let out a barely audible yelp as David tackled her into the snow. They rolled about in the snow for a second until David finally stabilized on top of Midnight. Her breathless laughs filled the air, and her hot breath warmed David's otherwise cold face. David allowed himself a moment to catch his breath after the chase, before staring down at his prey. Midnight's mouth curled up into a sheepish smile as her breathing returned to normal, and a moment passed before David leaned down and kissed her. They held the kiss for what felt like forever. Midnight wrapped her forelegs around David's neck and pulled him closer. She tilted her head slightly to the side to give him better access, and David happily took the opportunity. Their tongues met in a slow dance, both willing to let the other explore and taste their partner. The electrifying feeling of passion coursed through both of their bodies, and before long, David was weak in the knees and lazily laying on top of Midnight. Finally, the cold air forced them to break their kiss, and sadly they parted lips. A thin strand of saliva dangled between them for a moment longer before being lost to the wind.
It sure is cold out here, big guy.
Midnight said with a shiver.
Wanna go inside and warm up?
David replied as he lifted himself off of Midnight.
Sounds like a fantastic idea. I can make hot chocolate if you want.
As if I hadn't fallen for you enough, you go and offer hot chocolate? That sounds amazing.
David said with a smile.
Only the best for you, big guy.
Midnight said with a small blush. Midnight rose to her hooves with a helping hand from David. He quickly brushed some snow off of her coat before she used her magic to brush the excess snow off of his jacket. They both turned and walked back into the house, making sure to close the door this time. David and Midnight quickly removed their excess clothes and boots and made their way for the kitchen.
Hey, we have firewood, right? Hot cocoa by the fire sounds frickin' awesome.
David commented.
There should be a few logs in the cabinet next to the fireplace. If you want to make that, I'll get started in here.
Midnight responded from the kitchen.
On it.
David set about with starting the fire, while Midnight started making the hot chocolate. And soon, the smell of freshly brewed drinks filled the room. Midnight added a few marshmallows to each, making sure to add extra to her own, before levitating them beside her and heading to the living room. She entered the room to find David setting the logs ablaze. The crackling of the fire and the smell of burning wood quickly filled the room, with the radiant warmth of the fire not far behind. She gently tapped his leg and levitated his hot chocolate into his waiting hand. David took a gentle sip and sighed happily as the sweet taste filled his senses. He smiled warmly at Midnight, before sitting down on the couch and patting the seat to his side. Really odd thought here. You ever just wonder what would happen if you just splashed hot chocolate on a fire? Oh god, I'm sorry. Anywho, let's get on to our sensible donators. Top donators are 630, BadassWaffle, Only One Thing, Ceru Orion, Iron Sky, and Jesse Smith. Darkside, Raiden, Narwhals, Black Moon, Heart Pastel Skies, Austin Rollins, Stu Hex, Swordbrother, Marcher, Domicron, Library, Runeseth 9852, Will, Chris, Twinkie, Ride, Soul, Shadow Moon, Luigi 88, Chancer Crust, Big Smoke 369, Bobcat GGF, and many more awesome people. Thank you all so much for watching this video and live life to the fullest.